the partnership between Workday and Salesforce inside Birmingham City Council's massive ERP failure, and lessons from the digital transformation at Fedex. Those are just a few of the topics we're going to cover here in episode 186 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, welcome to episode 186 of Transformation Ground Control. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach their third stage of digital transformation success. And the show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, produced by Major Tom Productions. You can find new episodes of the show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. We've got a great episode for you today. We're going to jump right into it. A few things we're going to cover. We're going to start off by talking about this partnership between Workday and Salesforce. If you're not aware of this yet, super interesting. I think it's a good strategy that they're pursuing here to potentially give SAP and Oracle a run for their money in the ERP space. We'll start off the opening segment talking about that. And then we're also going to talk about the Birmingham City Council failure, which is a big, massive ERP implementation failure involving Oracle Fusion. Birmingham City Council is a city council in the UK. It's one of Europe's largest city government organizations. And we're going to talk about some of the lessons from that. We're actually going to play you a clip of a video I put out on my YouTube channel where I analyze the failure in some detail. Then we're going to get into some questions from the audience and comments from the audience on social media. So we're going to jump into that. And then later we'll have our guest of the show or this episode, which is going to be Chilla Batori, who is a change engagement lead at Fedex. She's based out of Amsterdam. She's going to chat with us about the ongoing digital transformation, not only at Fedex, but just her lessons about digital transformations and change management in particular, what some of the change management aspects are and some of the change management lessons are. So before we jump into our other topics and guests, though, I do want to get to some of the noteworthy or newsworthy items here this week. And one of the main things I want to chat about here today is this partnership between Salesforce and Workday. And it seems pretty clear that they've forged this partnership with this. I think it's more than a partnership. It's a pretty deep relationship where it looks like they're going after SAP, Oracle, and some of the other broader enterprise tech vendors. And this is really interesting timing for this news. This news just came out a couple weeks ago in the news recently. And what's interesting about it is this is the time of year where every year we put out our top 10 rankings of ERP systems. And one of the things I've always gotten critiqued on in my top 10 ranking or in our top 10 ranking for Third Stage Consulting is that I would always include Salesforce and Workday. Not super high on the list, but they're in the top 10 of ERP systems, in my opinion. And I get a lot of criticism at times for that because people will come back and say, hey, Salesforce is not an ERP system. I tend to disagree with that. I think Salesforce as a platform is an ERP system, or it can be an ERP system. Salesforce is known as a CRM solution, but they also have built this platform where third-party developers can create apps on Salesforce. For example, we do a lot of work in the manufacturing space, and there's a product called Rootstock, which is a manufacturing ERP system that's built on Salesforce. And so we see Rootstock, especially in the smaller, maybe some mid-market manufacturing company space, we'll see Salesforce as a platform provide a full ERP solution by using some of these third-party apps. So I've always thought that Salesforce is sort of like a pseudo ERP system. Certainly it is a platform. But now when you combine Salesforce with Workday's capabilities in HCM and Workday's capabilities in financials, now it looks as though there is somewhat of a deeper, broader capability that they're going to be able to provide jointly. So I think it's a great move. I think it provides buyers in the enterprise tech space more options. It's another great solution. I'll be curious to see how this actually unfolds in terms of how the two organizations are going to integrate the two solutions and how they're going to go to market, all that good stuff. There's a lot of stuff that is yet to be determined. But I think conceptually speaking, strategically speaking, it's a great idea. And what's interesting about this too is that, they started this relationship with the creation of an AI employee service agent. And that was sort of like a first step or sort of a stepping stone to the more broader relationship. And the CEO of Workday, his name's Carl Eskenbach, said, "We're integrating our platforms, our data sets, and our powerful AI capabilities to be able to do new things. It's not just to be able to offer this employee service agent." So, and actually, I'm reading this. This is all from an article out on Cloud Wars. If you go to accelerationeconomy.com, there's a section there on Cloud Wars. And so it's a great article written by Bob Evans just a couple weeks ago. And in this article, he sort of outlines the way this is unfolded. And I'll drop a link to this article in the chat or in the description field below, wherever you're listening or watching this podcast. But, some other comments here in this article. I'll just read you what Bob from Acceleration Economy has to say here. But Bob says, now in this era of the AI revolution, data is going to be more important than ever. So while Workday and Salesforce are extremely successful in the parts of the enterprise they work in, I think they realize they need to go broader to be able to do this. And I tend to agree with that. Although, the one thing I do wonder, though, I do agree, first of all, I think it's a great idea. I think the two of them combining forces is going to be pretty powerful, especially if they can create a tightly integrated solution and they can figure out, where the real source of truth lies and some of the integration points and whatnot. But one thing I do wonder in the case of Salesforce is, what does this do to their ecosystem? There's other platforms or other products out there that were built to do what Workday does, and they were built on the Force platform or on the Salesforce platform. So it does make me wonder, and I'm drawing a blank right now. There used to be a product called Force, or Financial Force. I think they've rebranded or renamed themselves. But Financial Force, for example, is a legacy financial type of system that's built on the Salesforce platform. So it does make me wonder, is this relationship with Salesforce and Workday going to overshadow some of the partners that have built products natively within the Salesforce platform? I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure how they're going to manage that potential fallout or that potential cannibalization of revenue amongst their partners. But I do think that's a really interesting direction they're going. And I think it's a good acknowledgement that both companies have grown and scaled so much in their individual areas, particularly Workday within HCM and financials, and Salesforce within CRM and customer service types of capabilities. Now you're putting all those capabilities together, plus you get the benefit of not only the scale that Workday has achieved and that Salesforce has achieved as a product, but also the whole platform behind Salesforce too. I'll be curious to see how this all comes together. Of course, it could be a great idea, brilliant, right idea, but be poorly executed. I'm not sure how it's going to unfold, but at least conceptually, assuming they can execute on it, it sounds like a great idea. And I'll be curious to see how it affects their market share, how it affects other ERP vendors, if they become legitimate contenders to SAP and Oracle, because quite frankly, right now, we don't see Salesforce compete much at all with SAP and Oracle. It's pretty rare that we see that. It's only for companies that are really doubling down on CRM. They might look at, Oracle CRM or SAP CRM and then compare it to Salesforce, but we don't really see that much of Salesforce versus SAP and Oracle. We do see a fair amount of Workday versus Oracle, maybe to a lesser degree Workday versus SAP. But now you put together Salesforce and Workday, I imagine we start to see more head-to-head evaluations between SAP, Oracle, maybe Microsoft Dynamics, and then of course Salesforce and Workday as well. So interesting stuff for sure, and be curious to see how that all unfolds. So that's the news for today, and I want to jump in and sort of shift gears to another newsworthy topic, but I'm going to do it in the context of a YouTube video I recently published. So this is a video I released just a couple weeks ago on my YouTube channel. If you don't follow me on YouTube, just search Eric Kimberling on YouTube, and be sure to subscribe and watch my videos there. But if you go out there and watch this video, and you see this video, I'm going to play the video for you that unpacks this case study. It's a failure case study involving Birmingham City Council. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, though, I'm going to play you this clip. And once we play the clip, I also want to turn to LinkedIn, because on LinkedIn, I posted a newsletter that sort of summarized the video, and I got a ton of feedback, a ton of comments on it. So I want to share some of that with you and sort of continue the conversation there. But we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll dive into the Birmingham City Council ERP failure out of Europe. And then later in the show, we still have yet to bring on our guest, which is Chilla Batori, I'm sorry. And she'll be on the show. She's a change engagement lead at Fedex out of Amsterdam in Europe. So she's going to be joining us here from Europe to talk about some lessons from her experience at Fedex and their digital transformation, as well as her experience with other change initiatives, business transformation types of initiatives with other organizations as well. So be sure to stick around. You're not going to want to miss that interview with her. It's a great conversation. So we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control. People oftentimes ask me how I built such a strong social media following on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and other outlets. And the fact of the matter is it took me a long time to build a following through a lot of trial and error, making a lot of mistakes. Had I known that there were companies out there that could help me build my brand, I would have done that a long time ago. I didn't know that, but the good news is that there is today a consulting firm that will help you through building your own personal brand through some of their training programs. The company is called Roloff Consulting, and if you're familiar with Emma Roloff, she's someone that I've had on this podcast before, and she's well known in the digital transformation space as well as the sales space, and she's big on TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And she and her husband have started a training course and a training company that focuses on helping people build their personal brands and helping them to sell themselves digitally. So whether you're a salesperson that's trying to reach more customers or you're an individual that's just trying to build your personal brand, that's something that they help with through their training programs. And they've offered listeners of this podcast a free 5-day LinkedIn challenge. And I encourage you to check it out. I've included a link below for this podcast. If you go to the podcast notes, you'll find a link that gets you free access to this 5-day challenge where you'll get step-by-step guidance. You'll get real results. So you'll get some tangible results from the program. And you also get a special offer at the end of it. So it's exclusive to listeners of this podcast. Be sure to check out the link below if you want to work on building your personal brand, or if you're in sales and you're trying to reach more people. Whatever the case may be, check it out. It's free to listeners of this podcast. You can check it out via the link below.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology independent and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 186. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also see past episodes of the show by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. And the show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting and produced by Major Tom Productions. So be sure to join us every week for this new episode that we release every Wednesday. So I want to dive into this Birmingham City Council failure. It's a massive failure out of Europe. It's one of Europe's biggest government entities, and they recently had a massive failure that ran about 6 times over budget, ran way over time, and actually led to the organization missing some of their numbers and ultimately filing for bankruptcy. And I'll include a link to the article on LinkedIn below. So you'll find that in the link below wherever you're listening or watching. But within that newsletter on LinkedIn, I also have a video. So I have a YouTube video and a newsletter together that sort of cover the same topic. So I'll include a link to the newsletter that goes along with this. But I'm going to play the video. When I come back from the video, we're actually going to dive into some of the comments I've received here on LinkedIn. A ton of comments just in a short period since posting this article. So we'll jump into it. So here's an overview of some of the lessons from this massive ERP failure at Birmingham City Council in Europe. Birmingham City Council is one of Europe's largest city councils, and they recently decided that they were going to replace their SAP system with Oracle Fusion. And in that process, they had budgeted 20 million pounds for the implementation. However, they ended up spending about 115 million pounds at the end of the day. It took years longer than expected, and still are not able to use the system to this day. In fact, they're not expecting to be able to use the system fully for another 3 years after the implementation. So what I want to do today is talk about why this implementation failed so miserably, and more importantly, discuss what you can do to avoid the same type of failure. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to share a little bit of information about Third Stage Consulting and who we are. Third Stage Consulting Group is an independent, technology agnostic provider of consulting services to help clients through their digital transformations. We help with digital strategy and software selection, as well as implementation planning. And during implementation, we provide services related to program management, organizational change, business process improvement, as well as enterprise architecture. These are just some of the services we provide. We have offices in North America as well as Europe and Asia Pacific. So if you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to check out our resource center, which includes a number of resources that will help you through your digital transformation, and you can access that for free using the QR code here or the links below. You can also reach out to me directly if you'd like to discuss your digital transformation and brainstorm ideas on how to improve where you're headed on your journey. Now let's jump back into today's content. So let's talk about the specifics of this particular implementation. I mentioned that Birmingham City Council is one of the largest city councils in Europe. I also mentioned that the organization had been using SAP for quite some time. In fact, they were using it for about 20 years from what I understand. And they were replacing the system, the SAP system, with Oracle Fusion. And this was a big deal at the time that they made that decision. And Larry Ellison even came out and publicly recognized what a big deal this was for Oracle to win against their fierce competitor in SAP. So this was a big deal that the city council was moving to Oracle. And they spent 120 million British pounds on this implementation after being told it would cost about 20 million. So big discrepancy in the amount of money that was invested in the project. And the worst part of all this is that at the end of the day, when they went live on the new system, they couldn't run their financials. They couldn't do audits. They couldn't do the basic things that they needed to do with the system. In fact, they're being told now, or they're estimating now, that it's going to take 3 to 4 more years after go live to be able to get to the point where they can automate some of the financials and some of the auditing functions. And to add insult to injury, the City Council recently announced that they're going to have to spend about 15 million pounds this year to do a manual audit on the books. And that's 15 million British pounds that they didn't expect to spend because they thought their automated system would allow them to do this. So obviously, this is a big mess. This is what we all try to avoid. So the question becomes, what is it we can do differently? Why did they fail, and what can we do differently to avoid that failure? The first thing we have to look at here is the fact that this is a big shift from SAP to Oracle. In fact, this is more than just a system replacement. Anytime you have an incumbent system that's been used for a very long time, it's been customized, you've built the internal competencies and maturities around that system, anytime you rip that system out and go to replace it with a new one, that's a high-risk endeavor. It's very complex. It's going to take a lot of time and cost you a lot of money to do it. So if you think about it, most organizations build a large IT staff that learn a certain system. The users of the system, the employees, they know how to use that one system. But in this case, we went from SAP now to Oracle Fusion, and that's a totally different mindset shift. It's a cultural shift. Oracle's a bit more flexible, has more capabilities in some areas and less capabilities in other areas. So I'm not saying Oracle is right or wrong for Birmingham City Council, but it's just a massive shift to go from one incumbent system to another, especially if you're a larger organization, especially if you're a complex organization, and especially if you've been using your legacy system for decades or more. So those are the things you have to think about. And so if a vendor comes to you and says, hey, we can implement this new system to replace your old one in just 18 months or 24 months, if you're a large organization, I would look at that and say, that doesn't sound right, because we are not just changing our systems, we are completely overhauling our processes. We've got to train people on an entirely new system. We have to build an IT staff that can support this new system. So there's a lot that goes into that. So recognizing that moving from one platform to another, especially if you're completely changing that platform and moving from one platform to a very different one, that's going to increase the cost, risk, and time associated with your project. Now, we also have to look at this concept of digital maturity. A more digitally mature organization that is used to modern technologies and has built a very innovative culture and a very robust IT staff internally, that organization is going to have a little bit easier time transitioning to a new system than an organization that is sort of rooted in an older technology and maybe just doesn't have that digital maturity or that sense of innovation or that culture of innovation within their organization. Now, I don't know Birmingham City Council. I've never worked with them. I've never worked for them, so I couldn't tell you what their culture is. But based on what I've read in public records related to this project, it sounds like they have a highly tenured staff. It sounds like they've been using the same systems and the same processes for a long time, which would tell me they probably have a fairly low digital maturity. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not judging them for that. A lot of organizations have low digital maturity. But what you have to recognize, when you have a low digital maturity, it's going to take you longer, it's going to be riskier and more costly for you to move to an entirely new system. So you just have to plan accordingly. I'm not saying that this project should have cost 120 million pounds, but it probably was never going to cost 20 million pounds no matter how well they manage the project, because they're a big, complex organization and their digital maturity is relatively low. So it's important to recognize what your digital maturity is and recognize the gap between where you are today and where you're going in the future. One of the failure points that were recognized by audits of this project and people that had worked for Birmingham City Council in this project was that the project governance wasn't up to par. There wasn't enough project governance to ensure that the project was going to be successful and that the project was going to stay on track. Now, I don't know a lot of details of what that means or what the project governance was or wasn't, but it's interesting after the fact to hear an organization say we didn't have the right project governance and therefore we involved our CEO in the project, which is what happened here in this case. So I don't know if the project wasn't directly reporting to the CEO until later or not, but it sounds like it probably wasn't. And I'm not saying a CEO needs to be involved in every single detail of a project or even that a CEO should be the project manager or even the project sponsor, but the CEO and a leader of an organization should absolutely be heavily involved in any digital transformation project, especially one as complex and risky as this one. It sounds like that was a lesson they learned along the way and they got the CEO more involved later on after the project was already well off track, partially because they were getting so much public backlash being a public institution. But at the end of the day, they did make that adjustment. But it is a good reminder that you want to make sure you have solid project governance and sponsorship of the project at the executive level. One of the interesting nuances of this implementation is that the City Council moved from a highly customized version of SAP and they tried to move to a highly customized version of Oracle to replicate what they were doing in that highly customized version of SAP. So that's another risk point right there, is when we customize software, the more we customize software, the riskier it's going to be for our project. And the thing to note here is customization is a problem because not only does it cost you more, it increases risk in an implementation, but it also oftentimes masks a deeper problem, which is a lack of acceptance of how modern technology works. So in this case, I'm speculating here, but in this case, if the organization was used to the way SAP operated and they try to replicate that in Oracle and they weren't even open to the way that Oracle operated off the shelf, then they were going to probably customize the software more than they needed to. And that's a common phenomenon we see a lot with our clients that we work with, is that customization is a problem for a number of reasons, but oftentimes it's a symptom of a deeper issue, which is lack of organizational change management or lack of acceptance from a human perspective. So we really have to think about what we can do to avoid customization and ensure that we manage change effectively within our organization to avoid this type of failure. One of the other interesting things that I read about in this case is that not only was the cost escalating quickly as the project went on, it went again from 20 million British pounds to 113 million British pounds, but the expected business benefits and expected business value kept getting ratcheted down. So over time, as the implementation went on, they started adjusting the business case and setting expectations lower. And who knows whether or not that's because they just were underperforming, under-delivering in the project, and or if it's because the business case and the expected business benefits were never realistic to begin with. It's probably a combination of both if I were to base it on experience. But the key here is to recognize you need to have an accurate understanding of what your business case costs are, and just as importantly, maybe even more importantly, you want to have a very clear understanding of what the benefits are. And I'll add another dimension to this discussion too, which is a little bit outside the realm of business case, but it's very related to it, and that is to understand and quantify what the potential impact to your operations are if the project doesn't go well. So in other words, if you can't close the books, if you can't run payroll, if you can't ship product, if you can't take customer orders, what would that mean to your organization? How much would that cost you? Because oftentimes that puts things in perspective to help you make decisions of, well, do we want to spend that extra time to really thoroughly test the system, or do we want to invest a little bit extra in our change management, our training to ensure that we don't run into that problem? And it'll help your team understand and make educated decisions about the risk-reward trade-off. And again, that's usually not built into a lot of business cases, but we still have to think about the cost-benefit of increasing time and cost on an implementation versus increasing the risk of operational disruption when we go live. So these are just a few of the lessons that I picked up from studying this case, and I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are on that as well. So please drop in the comments what you think the biggest problem might have been with this city council, or if you've ever seen or been a part of an implementation failure or a troubled project. I'd love to hear your comments. What do you think the biggest root causes are, the biggest lessons are, and takeaways are from implementation failures? To learn more about how to avoid these sorts of challenges, I encourage you to read our free ebook that you can find on our website. It's called Lessons from 1,000 ERP Implementations. In this ebook, it'll provide my 20 lessons for what I found and our team has found to be the most important lessons from having helped over 1,000 organizations through their digital transformations. You can read that book by scanning the QR code right here, or you can go to the links below. So that's my YouTube clip of Birmingham City Council's ERP failure and some of the lessons that go along with that. I want to dive in and continue the conversation around this and get some of the feedback we've received on LinkedIn regarding this particular case study. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control. Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting, and I want to invite you to join our annual tech agnostic conference called Digital Stratosphere. Digital Stratosphere is a conference that features some of the industry's brightest minds, greatest thinkers, and it's a great opportunity to network with peers, other industry people, other CIOs, other project team members that are going through digital transformations or ERP implementations. We've got a great lineup of speakers this year. It's a 3-day event, a lot of great entertainment, networking opportunities. I'll be there as one of the keynote speakers, along with some of my favorite speakers in the industry as well, both within Third Stage Consulting, but also outside the company as well. So I encourage you to check it out and learn more. You can go to stratosphere2024.com to learn more about the event. You can see the agenda, the way it's shaping up, and you can see some of the past testimonials of people that have attended. And the event is October 2nd through the 4th, 2024. It's going to be based in Denver, Colorado, downtown Denver, beautiful downtown Denver in the fall, which is a great time to visit Denver if you haven't been. Again, stratosphere2024.com. Check out the agenda. Check out our early bird pricing for passes. And the other beautiful things, if you can't be here in person in Denver, which we hope you can, but if you can't, you can also join remotely as well. We have virtual passes available as well, so you're able to join from wherever in the world you might want to join from. So stratosphere2024.com, check it out, and I hope to see you there.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 186. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also see all the past episodes that you might have missed by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. So be sure to bookmark that page. Check it out every week. You'll see new episodes pop up there on the website. You can also subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen or watch podcasts. So be sure to check it out there. Third Stage Consulting is the sponsor, and you can learn more about us by going to thirdstage-consulting.com. So we just played you this YouTube clip regarding Birmingham City Council, this massive ERP failure involving Oracle Fusion. They're trying to replace SAP with Oracle Fusion, turned to a big cost overrun, a big money pit, took a lot of time to get through the implementation, a lot of challenges that went along with that. And in the video, I talk about some of the lessons from that case study. And what was really interesting, though, is when we got into some of the comments on social media. There's a lot of really good comments here. On LinkedIn, I published a newsletter that sort of summarized the same things I talk about in that video. And there's a lot of great feedback we got here on LinkedIn. I'm include a link to the LinkedIn newsletter that you can go check it out. You can join the conversation in real time and see what other comments have been added since we released this podcast episode. And you can join the conversation there as well. But just some interesting comments here on LinkedIn. Mark on LinkedIn says the really shocking point is that having been declared bankrupt, where BCC managed to scrape together the wherewithal to do this in the first place. So yeah, that's a great point, that they had been going through some severe financial difficulties and they still were able to scrape together the wherewithal to do the project in the first place. And maybe that's why the project failed. Maybe they had bigger fish to fry, or there's too many other issues they're trying to tackle within the organization that led them to not be able to devote the appropriate amount of time and resources and energy to the project. I don't know. That's pure speculation since I'm not involved with this organization and they're not a client of Third Stages, but just based on public record and what we know about Birmingham City Council, I would imagine that's quite possible that that's part of the reason why they struggled with their implementation. This is a comment here is from Lars on LinkedIn. Lars says, working with public implementations is a completely different ballgame. There's so many rules and regulations, which is why customization is necessary. I like to say that the public sector is three-dimensional while the private sector is two-dimensional because there are far more stakeholders involved in the public sector than the private sector. Really good point. And I think that's a good reminder that, you might be able to implement technology within a certain time and budget that a vendor tells you. Usually they're going to give you some sort of timeline and estimate that's probably realistic for them to do, but it's not realistic for them to do necessarily within your business. And it's your business and your ability to change that's going to determine how fast or slow or how expensive a project is going to be. And unfortunately, most organizations just cannot simply move as fast as a technology can. So when you're looking at how are we going to deploy this technology, it might be that the vendor could implement it in, say, 12 or 18 months. But the question is, can you change fast enough to meet a 12 or 18-month deadline? And most of the time, the answer to that is no. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not criticizing organizations. It's just the reality of the world. Organizations, especially the really big ones, public sector even more so, have trouble changing. And it's not that they don't want to change. It's not that they can't change. It's just they can't change as fast as technology would suggest they might be able to. And so it's a good reminder that we have to really understand, let's be realistic about how organizationally we make decisions and how we engage stakeholders and how we get that alignment and how we redefine our processes. That's the stuff that takes a long time. It's not designing, configuring, and building the technology. That's not the part that typically delays a project or causes a project to cost more time and money. It's usually because the organization itself can't make decisions fast enough and they can't move fast enough and get alignment fast enough and define their processes fast enough in order to meet whatever timeline the vendor has in mind from their perspective. So great point there about the public sector having kind of a third dimension there with additional stakeholders and regulations. This one's for Jamil on LinkedIn. Jamil says, achieving a balance between people, process, and technology is not an easy undertaking. Once achieved, it takes effort to dismantle that balance and reestablish it again with another combination of people, process, and technology. So great point there. Thank you for sharing that comment, Jamil. Sarah on LinkedIn says, very insightful article. This sentence sums up the reason why many public sector digital transformations fail. And that sentence is, customization often masks deeper problems such as resistance to change or lack of acceptance of new technologies. It's a great point. And I would say that's a great line, but it was my own line, so I don't want to give myself credit for it. But I do think that customization oftentimes is a symptom of something else. And I think a lot of times it's easy to blame the fact that we customized as the root cause, but really that's a symptom oftentimes of a deeper root cause, which is we don't want to change. So we want to customize the software to sort of mimic what we're used to. Now, that's not always the case. I mean, there are obviously strategic exceptions to that where it does make sense to customize the software. In fact, there was a comment here that I'm actually looking for as we speak that was from someone who was talking about some of the comments around customization. So I'm going to try and pull that up here while we're talking. But those are some of the interesting points so far. A lot of the comments you'll see here are related to the fact that this is public sector and some of the complexities that go along with the public sector here. So let's see. There's another comment here is from CN on LinkedIn. CN says, I imagine people, no matter who they are, would have to build an app from scratch to support the city council's process because there simply isn't a pre-made app that meets most of the city council's requirements. Therefore, they should choose an ERP framework in which IT can efficiently build applications. But the ERP framework they chose was the most difficult framework for me to build an application on. So, really interesting point. I know customization and custom dev oftentimes gets a really bad rap in the commercial off-the-shelf ERP technology space. But customization is not a bad thing. Sometimes it's a necessity, especially if you are a unique business or especially if there's not a system out there that does exactly what you need it to do. Now, the problem is that customization has such a bad rap for the reasons I mentioned a moment ago, which is customization is often a symptom of not wanting to change. And customization is also a slippery slope. Once you start customizing, it's sort of like a gateway drug or whatever you want to call it. It sort of leads you to a lot of other bad customizations. And once people realize you can customize the software and that you as an organization are willing to customize the software, then a lot of times the organization will sort of pile on and start to add things that they want to customize. And so that's where project governance comes in, is you really have to have a really solid, very clear vision for how you're planning to use technology and how you want your business to run. And you have to tie any sort of customization request back to the project governance and making sure that those customizations and the costs and risks that go along with that can be validated and confirmed that they can actually support business value that you're expecting and wanting to get out of your digital transformation. And if there's customization requests coming in that don't tie back to a business case, that's where you say, we're just not going to do it. It doesn't make sense for us to customize the software when it works, when we could just adapt to the software potentially. So you really have to assess the risk or reward of customizing software, which has its own inherent risks, but also imposing massive change on your organization that has inherent risks too. So you just have to look at both and say which one is better aligned with what we're trying to accomplish as an organization, and what are we going to do to mitigate the downside risk of whichever path we go down, because neither path is perfect by any means. And I suppose that's the blessing and the curse of ERP software. The blessing is that ERP software providers provide a fully integrated, comprehensive solution. The bad news is no one ERP system can possibly be everything to everyone. Even within one organization, it's not going to be everything to everyone. The best ERP system out there is not going to meet all of your needs. It's just not going to. And you just have to go in with that expectation that you might get 80% of the way there, but there's that last 10 or 20% that you're not going to get there with off-the-shelf capabilities. So that's where the pain is. That's where you figure out what kind of trade-offs are we willing to make and what aren't we. And in some cases, you might say, okay, that we might solve some of the problems through customization. We might solve some of the problems through just forcing change in our business processes. You might solve some of the problems by doing a third-party bolt-on solution. And you might solve part of the problems, God forbid, by not putting in any technology. You might just do nothing for part of your organization. That's okay too. Sometimes that's the better option. Sometimes the way things are working right now for parts of your business might be just fine. Why touch it? Why mess it? Not broke, don't fix it. And so that's what we have to think about. And that's the way we need to think about those sorts of decisions around customization and whatnot. This comment here is from Fethy on LinkedIn. Fethy says implementation failure is not related to the ERP vendor, whether it's Oracle or SAP. The main problem is that consultants and project teams are not on the same wavelength. Very good point. I totally agree with that. Everyone needs to be on the same page, and you can't let the consultants run wild with your project and just go start building stuff when they don't necessarily have a common vision or an understanding of where the organization is trying to go. This comment is from Jan on LinkedIn. The core issue is excessive spending to secure future funding, a common public sector mindset. This is why we conduct spending, cut audits, and emphasize the importance of departments working closely with finance on benefits realization. Often departments assume finance only handles numbers, but we're critical partners and should be involved early in the early stages of the project. So great point, Jan. I totally agree that you want to make sure different departments are involved for sure, but you point out a good public sector mindset, which is future funding, and I'm not sure how much that played into it, but it certainly sounds like a legitimate assumption or hypothesis of what happened here. Barry Preston on LinkedIn says, not at all surprisingly. Unfortunately, it saddens me, though. I have no doubt there are plenty of organizations that would really benefit from changes in their systems, but just won't do it to the reputation we've made for ourselves. The worst part, it's really not that difficult. Apply some basic concepts and no project should ever get this far off track. Sad, really sad. Totally agree. That's actually really well said, Barry. Thank you for that comment. And I think you hit a couple really good points here. One is that, it's creating a lot of fear and uncertainty and doubt in the market when you see failures like this. And to the other point that Barry makes, it doesn't have to be that way. This isn't rocket science. This isn't super difficult to be successful. You just have to make some basic, sound, fundamental decisions. And that's what we try to talk about here on this podcast. It's what we do as a consulting team at Third Stage Consulting to help our clients be more successful. It's what I try to share in my YouTube videos and all the content we put out there. So hopefully, people start to learn and learn from these mistakes and figure out ways to be better in the future. I think all that is going to be really important. So good stuff here. I'm just going to pick maybe one other comment here. There's a ton here. And in fact, even as I'm reading these, there's still more comments being posted. So that's part of why I'm having trouble keeping my place here on where I'm scrolling through the questions. This is actually this is the comment I was mentioning before that I've been looking for. And this might be my favorite comment in the thread because it actually disagrees with something I say in the article. And I think it's a great point of clarification that ultimately, as I read this, I realize he's disagreeing with me, but I actually agree with what he's saying. I agree with his counterpoint here. So this is from Gianluca. I hope I'm pronouncing that. Gianluca on LinkedIn. And Gianluca says, avoid, he's quoting me here. Now here's a quote from me that he pulls out of the newsletter. He says, avoid excessive customization of the new system. Focus on leveraging the out-of-box capabilities and adapt your processes to fit the new system rather than customizing the system to fit your existing processes. That's the end of the quote, and that's directly from the article. And then he goes on to say, I totally disagree with the statement. Processes need to be subordinated and designed to the strategy. Technology then is to be subordinated to the processes. Awesome point. Totally agree. And in fact, I think what you do here is you're actually pulling out a flaw in the way I wrote this. And I there's nothing that you say I disagree with in that sentence. I agree with everything you say. So I think where I could have been crisper or more clear in my comment is that where you can, you want to avoid excessive customization. I think there's a slippery slope between no customization, some customization, and a lot of customization. Once you move away from no customization, which by the way, most organizations do, if not all organizations we work with, are going to do some amount of customization. So let's just assume most organizations should be somewhere in the middle. They should be allowing some customization. The problem is once they start some customization, they end up going down that slippery slope because they can, and they realize they can customize and they're willing to customize. That's where the pile-on effect comes in. I mentioned before how people will start to pile on and start asking for more changes once they see that some of the changes are being accepted and customized in the system. So that's where project governance comes in, and you have to really differentiate between two sets of customization requests. One is going to be the things that are just resistance to change. It's not, we don't really need this customization. It's just you don't want to be dismissive to your employees and stakeholders that are suggesting this, but you do have to differentiate between those that people are just trying to mimic their old way of doing things, and it doesn't really add any business value, versus the ones that are really important to you as a business, and they are strategic. It makes you who you are. There might be some regulatory regulation. It might be a customer demand or a customer requirement that you're trying to meet. And if your software can't do it, you can't just say, well, sorry, customer, I'm not going to give you the service that I've always given you because my ERP system doesn't let me or it doesn't support that capability. You're probably going to say, okay, in that case, I'm either going to customize the software or I'm going to put a bolt-on in place or figure out some sort of workaround to make sure that I give the customers what they're expecting. And the last thing you want to do is implement a new ERP system only to water down and undermine your capability. So I think that's a great point. I think that over customization, I stick to that point. The excessive customization is a problem. You shouldn't have excessive customization. You'll probably have some, but even of that some, you just want to be real critical and really particular about where you really do customize, because again, you don't want to go too far down the path of too much customization. So I think I'm pretty much agreeing with you for the most part. I would say that I still stand by the fact that my point is you don't want excessive customization. And when you do leverage new ERP technology, you want to use out of the box and sort of standard functionality wherever you can. And if you can't, that's where the question is. What do you do about where you can't? So that's the point of clarification I was trying to make, but I think you articulated it really well in your comment here. So those are just a few of the comments that came from this discussion. Again, I'll include a link below, so be sure to go check out the conversation, join in, chime in, let me know what you think. Read the article, read the newsletter. I'd love to hear your feedback on it, and I'll include a link below so you can check it out. So all that being said, we're going to shift gears and bring on our first guest, or our first and only guest of this show is going to be Chilla Batori, and she is a change engagement lead at Fedex, and she's helped them through their digital transformation. She's also helped lots of other organizations through their change initiatives. So we're going to talk about change management and how you manage change, and some of her lessons and experiences from having helped Fedex and other organizations through their digital transformation and just general business transformation journeys. A lot of what she's going to talk about is not only related to technology initiatives, it's also related to outsourcing and process reengineering and just general business change. And as you can imagine, Fedex, like a lot of organizations, is going through a lot of change, and a lot of the companies that Chilla has worked for over the years has gone through significant change, and she's going to talk about some of the lessons there. So We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have that conversation to talk about some of the lessons from digital transformation at Fedex. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you will want to download the Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 186. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com, and you can also see the past episodes of the show at that time as well, at that same website as well, Transformation Ground Control. So joining me for our interview here today is Chilla Batori. She is a change engagement lead based out of Europe for Fedex, and she's also done change engagement and change management, change leadership for other organizations as well. She's got a lot of great multinational experience with complex business and digital change initiatives. And we're going to talk about some of the lessons she has from both working at Fedex as well as earlier in her career working at other organizations throughout the world as well. So with all that being said, Chilla, welcome to the show.
Hi, Eric. It's great to be here on the show.
Yeah, I appreciate having you first time here, and I appreciate you being here today. Tell us a little about yourself and sort of what your current role is and how you grew up in this the whole transformation space here, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you. So I was born in Ukraine, and I myself kind of traveled through continents. I currently work in Amsterdam, and I work for this big global transportation and logistics company. But my journey started back as an American studies major, having completed a few scholarships in the US, and then having started to work for GE. Who were on their outsourcing journey and were looking at Central Eastern Europe as the target destination for outsourcing a lot of back office processes. So thanks to that, I entered the world of work and the corporate environment, and I grew up through the ranks. I managed a few teams. I was in charge of continuous improvement. I was a process engineer for a while. Then I swapped over to an old company. And I became a business account manager, a liaison between the shared service center, so the outsource provider, and the business. And then I met change management about 10 years ago, and I fell in love. So here I am 10 years later, working for a completely different industry again, but always kind of against the backdrop of process optimization and outsourcing. I know these are four-letter words for some, and I know the world of outsourcing is changing a lot too. Think about automation and standardization instead of just shipping processes over. I really enjoyed the journey, and I am here today as one of the amazing moments of this journey.
That's great. So you mentioned that I think you said you met or you sort of stumbled into change management. How did you make that shift and why?
Well, I think this is a great question. I don't think we rehearsed this one.
No, this is the one you already asked.
Yeah, I think just working with people kind of makes you really sensitizes you to change. And when I was working as a business account manager, I was constantly in the middle. I was this liaison between what the business, what our kind of the people who paid our bills wanted, and the outsource teams who were, often they didn't understand what was happening, why things were happening the way. No one really explained the case for change to them. There was a lot of, very little of what's in it for me. So as a business account manager, I think I already was acting as a change manager, trying to translate a lot of this to the language that made sense to the people on the ground who were in the back office executing the processes. And then I worked a lot with communication teams, so they made me appreciate, choosing the right words, communicating at the right time, using the right channels, because change and communication go hand in hand. Then came and asked to go to South Africa for a month to work in one of our centers and to support the center lead there. And my whole life changed, and I came back as a change manager afterwards.
Interesting. So you were asked to do it, and you fell in love with it, and continue to do it to this day.
Exactly. I don't think you can drive me away with a stick. I think this is my passion, and I love learning about it, reading about it. I follow a lot of channels. I'm ProSci certified. So I think whatever they're doing there is amazing. Check out the latest AI assistance. I think I just found my calling.
Yeah, that's great. Well, good to have you here today. Looking forward to learning from some of your experiences here, and want to turn to the audience here real quickly and thank those that are joining from multiple countries here today. Our guest here today, Chilla, mentioned that she's in Hungary from Amsterdam, or works in Amsterdam. I'm in Denver, Colorado in the U.S. And I also want to say hello to Lena, who's joining from Barcelona. She works at Infor as a BDR. Thanks to Antoine from Montreal. Thanks to Darian for joining from Denver, and Thomas from Germany. So thanks for being here today. And Fethi says hello, although you didn't say where you're from, Fethi, but thank you for joining wherever you are here today. And any questions you have along the way too, please drop those in the chat, and I'll get to those as we dive into the conversation and get further into it here today. But just to get started, I suppose, could you tell us a little bit about maybe a sort of a case study of the project you're working on now, and sort of initiatives you've been working on in recent years? Maybe just give us a little case study, if you don't mind, of case study of change and sort of what your experience has been in the current environment you're working in.
Yeah. So let me start maybe with the past, because it also describes how change management is evolving, or the kind of projects that I think we tend to work on increasingly. So when I started 10 years ago, it was a lot of outsourcing or insourcing or captive and shared and services. So a lot of that, where are we going to put the work? Instead of maybe the core business, which really should be focusing on strategy and being in touch with customers, instead of typing up those invoices. So a lot of the change projects I used to support at that time were sitting down with teams who were transitioning work from one place to another, and then working through the people aspects of that. Because again, maybe let's just stop for a moment and just say, what kind of change management do I do? So I don't do IT change management. I do people change management. So in what I do, I work with people from getting them from the current state to the desired state in a way that's a collaborative effort that brings their creativity to the table. And throughout this process, we speak to them in a language they understand. We're not condescending, and we're co-creating change if we can in most of the cases. So you can't really co-create change with people who are losing their jobs, can you? Right? So that's the kind of old, transition-related change management. There's a lot of emotion there. There's feelings, usually not very positive. And even if you're at the receiving end of change, because you are sitting in a lower cost country, and I think the emphasis is on lower because it's such a transient thing, right? Who is lower cost? Nobody wants to be a low cost country, I think, anymore, a low cost resource. But that's just the reality of things. Even when you're at the receiving end of change, it's hard. You get a lot of emotion, you get a lot of, resentment, you get a lot of resistance. So a lot of that change is working through, how are you feeling? Why, what happened to you this week? Who didn't want to work with you this week? Who didn't show up this week? Who's showing signs of, passive aggressive or outright aggressive behavior with you instead of, agreeing to transition the knowledge to you, which is why we're here for. And this is how we make the company successful in the long term. This was the past 10 years ago. And I know a lot of companies are still doing this. However, I think what's really much more exciting is the future, or some of the projects that I'm now involved in. And these are, and it's never one project. I loved your question, how you said, what's the current project you're working on? I wish it was one. Right. There's always multiple projects. So the project I'm working on at the moment, there's a whole department which we're changing, and we're changing the organization, changing the operating model, we're changing the interactions, we're changing the roles and responsibilities, everything, where we're putting, just everything is upside down. Because some of the old ways of working, or some of the assumptions we started out with, it started out as a nice outsourcing project, but we had to adjust, I think, to the realities, and we need to be much more we need to be really close to the customer now. We need to listen more to the customer, even though I work in finance, so we're just back office, right? But we can't just be back office. Back office should always also be doing what works best for the customer. Issue that invoice, which is easiest to pay, right? So you never have to get the call with with the inquiry, where is this, or where is that, or how do I pay you? So everything is about the customer now. Speed, removing the voice transaction to the extent possible, right? Making it really seamless, really frictionless. A one click for the customer to pay that invoice, to resolve that dispute for us. These are the kind of projects I'm working on nowadays, as well as automation. Of course, that's the really exciting new realm that we're moving into. But yeah, more about that, I think, later on in the show.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you talk about the customer experience and how something as simple, or something that seems unrelated to a customer experience, like how a customer pays their invoice, that can have an impact on the overall customer experience and your brand. So there's so many things that we do in our change and transformation disciplines that would affect that. I would imagine we'll come back to that as well. Mm-hmm. Well, very good. So in all these years of experience, all these different projects, I understand, at no one time is it just one change project that's happening. Usually it's a broader set of changes, or a series of changes, and a series of projects that are happening all at once. But just in general, if you look back on all the change initiatives you've been involved with over the years, what are some of the things, or some of the tips or best practices you've learned to be most critical or most important in change initiatives?
Yeah, I'm going to sound really and say the obvious here, but not overestimating your role as a change manager. So, and then let me explain kind of what I mean. So I'm I consider myself a rather proactive person, and I like to roll my sleeves up, and I like to do stuff when I don't see maybe everyone jumping to the task immediately. And I learned the hard way that I'm not the person people want to hear from. So if anyone knows the Brasine methodology, they have this amazing graph which says, who do people want to hear messages from, and what kind of messages do they want to hear from whom? So it's the executives that they want to hear the why are we doing this? What's the business context? What happens if we don't do it now? And then the second most credible speaker is the line manager. The change manager is nowhere on this list, or with the little teeny tiny graph that no one looks at the bottom. So this was a bit of an aha moment for me, because I used to be a direct manager, and I used to be like, telling people what it is and sending a bunch of emails to, big distribution lists. No. The people are so selective in their attention nowadays. They will read the email from their managing director and from the vice president and maybe their line manager, because they can, they still do the performance reviews together. Everybody else's emails go to a different, ranking in that pile. So that's one very big learning for me, that I need to go back to my business account management practice. I am a liaison. I make things happen. I help the sponsors, so the executives, for instance, understand that if they remain quiet, things are not really going to happen, because you don't really see the leadership really paying attention. So why should I, right? That's again completely normal. And maybe another best practice. I don't know best, and I shouldn't have to know best. Again, I'm a change manager, so I connect people, and there are people who always know better. We just need to find these people. Now, sometimes these people are really positive and very, very vocal, and they're exactly the kind of change champions that a change manager needs, right? People enthusiastic, driving the change together, thinking ahead, proactively together. And then there are those people who are negative. They're very vocal, but they're very knowledgeable at the same time. So I guess finding these people and learning to work with them is another kind of very big skill, and a very kind of useful best practice that I'd recommend everyone. I just call them my influencers. And, sometimes your influencers are, teaching you good things, and sometimes they're spreading messages that are just not right. But you got to find them, because they drive so much sentiment, that if you are just communicating through the formal channels and they're kind of through the informal channels, you'll fail, because you're working against each other. So find them, make one team, and then make sure that the official messages get cascaded, but using the people that are really trusted speakers.
We're here with Chilla Batori talking about her experience and lessons from being a change lead at Fedex. And we're going to continue that conversation when we come back. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. Could you whisper in my ear? I recently published my first book. It's called The Final Countdown: Strategies to Reach the Third Stage of Digital Transformation. And I wrote this book because I really wanted to find a concise way to share some of my knowledge around digital strategy and how to get started on a digital transformation journey. So in this book, I cover 3 different sections. I cover the people, process, and technology aspects of transformation, with the idea that it's meant to be a starting point, a launching pad for organizations and team members that are going through digital transformations. So I encourage you to buy this book. You can get it electronically, you can get it paperback, or you can get it in hard copy, as I'm holding here in front of you. You can get it by going to thefinalcountdown.com. You can also search for it on Amazon if you shop at Amazon. Otherwise, just go to thefinalcountdown.com. Love to hear your feedback on this book as well. So I hope you check it out and hope you enjoy.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me, or visit our website for more details.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 186. My name is Eric Kimberlane. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. And I'm here with Chilla Batori, who is a change engagement lead at Fedex out of Europe, talking about some of her lessons from digital transformation at Fedex. If the influencers don't communicate, which you mentioned, sometimes they communicate the wrong things, and then you have to come in and clean it up, which oftentimes even worse is when they communicate nothing and people create their own answers. So it's really, I agree with you. It's important to get the messaging from the right people, from the credible source, from people that people trust and respect within the organization, for sure. And unfortunately, people like you and I, the outside change consultants, aren't nearly as credible as an internal person. Good deal. So just a couple comments here I want to turn to from the audience. A few comments in YouTube on particular. This is from Scott. Scott says, Scott and Reno here. Great point on who people listen to. If the message is not coming from their direct chain of command, then forget about it. So great point there. I think we're both in agreement there. If it doesn't come through someone with authority and credibility and leadership within the organization, it's not going to be well received, or not as well received, for sure. Here's a question from, pull it up here if I can. There it is. From Antoine on YouTube. Antoine says, how to manage change for people that will receive a negative impact from a project. I believe it's utopian to believe that all change is positive for everyone. And you even mentioned, Chilla, like, back in the day, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, some of the projects you worked with involved people's jobs being eliminated. And that's a lot harder change to swallow. But how do you manage those negative impacts, or those things that maybe aren't, great for you or I, but they might be great for the rest of the organization? How do you manage those changes?
Yeah, I have a one word or two word answer: with honesty. So, Anton, I think this is a great question. And I think this is, sometimes I get this question, what do you do? I'm a change manager. You make people do stuff they don't want to do, right? So this is, I think, a bad rep for change management, or bad rep for maybe bad change managers, if I'm very honest. I like to say tough things, and I like people to talk about what hurts instead of painting this rosy picture of something that's not. What's in it for me, right, is a very, very important part of understanding your audience. And if you don't take their perspective, if you are only towing the party line and you're saying, this is so great for the company because we're going to save $400 million zillion. I'm sorry, who cares if I, as the individual, lose my job, or all my colleagues are leaving? The whole department is something else from tomorrow. We all experience change on our own our own level, individual level. So even if the change is great for you, you can still be unhappy about it because, let's say, you've got so many things going on in your life that you just have no capacity to take or to absorb yet another change. So I think being honest about it, if it's not a good change, if it's really just cutting costs, which unfortunately every company has to do, then just say it. And we always do these things, right, as a corporation, to stay successful on the long term. We have a responsibility to our shareholders. It's short-term cuts may actually help a company restructure for the future and for success, but not all change is positive by any means. And whomever suggests this, I think, is a utopian dreamer / not a very good change manager, and feel free to challenge them.
Yeah, you don't want to oversell it or be overly positive or overly optimistic about the changes. And a lot of times I think of people like salespeople. If you're going through a broader transformation or broader automation project, a lot of times salespeople end up having to do more work. Now they're being asked to track more steps in the pipeline or more information in the CRM system. And for salespeople, just as a broad stereotype, they don't want to do that, largely because they don't make money from doing that. Perception, I make more commission when I'm selling, not when I'm entering stuff in the back office system. But so you have to kind of acknowledge that in that case, and then sell them on the fact that actually here's how it's going to help the broader organization. And it actually might help you sell more. And here's how it might help you sell more by, this new automation rolling out, this new tool, whatever it might be.
Yeah, exactly. And I think sales are such a peculiar group of people, right? We all we are in finance, right? So they are our biggest stakeholder in a way. And we don't like them sometimes because they really bring the tough messages. They're the ones who the customer calls screaming, and they're the ones who need to do the extra admin. And so we think of them as people in nice suits going out for fancy drinks. Whereas we in the back office, we were supposed to save that extra $5, but they, I think it's really worth listening to them. So one of the changes, that can really help a back office organization is to bring in the voice of sales, the voice of customer through sales into transformation conversations, into process improvement, even into reworks, if you will, because they really bring that direct insight from what hurts or pleases the customer.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And Scott has another comment here on YouTube. Scott says that followed up by an even better point regarding the influencers. I see not enough time on the front end working on this issue. Maybe I'll turn that into a question though for Chilla. How do you, when you go into an organization and you're just starting out, you're being brought in to help lead the change or help be part of the change. You don't necessarily know who all the formal and informal political influencers are within an organization. So how do you identify who those most important influencers are within an organization, and when do you do that?
Yeah, the $1 million question, right? And then how do I make them actually join me and abandon a lot of other things they're doing? So I think there are people in every organization who are really visible and they're involved in a lot of things, right? So I think you just have to kind of have a feel for the place, and they'll find you, they'll come your way because they're genuinely interested. Even if no one's asked them to support this project, they'll be coming to you and they'll be giving you feedback and they'll be telling you what you're doing wrong. So that's one thing, how you can find them. The other thing is, going through management and having people volunteer, whatever is the right word, to join your project. That's not always successful. And sometimes we start with one set of people and then we end up with another. People may understand that their availability is different than we had expected, or what the project needs are different than we had expected. And people come and go. I think what I like to do is keep kind of the demand on the team rather flexible, because if I tell anyone, okay, you need to be with me on this project for the next 1 year and it's 4 hours per week, I'll never find anyone to join me. So I think as the volume of work fluctuates, and as in any good project, the planning stage of the project should have most of the work, right? Not, you can then monitor execution, you can choose to do course correction, but if we put in the effort into that starting phase, and then if you have a good PMO office where not all the projects start on the 1st of January, then you can plan your resources better and identify those influencers naturally, or by going to the leadership team, or just ask what people are currently working on. I think what I find very powerful is that if I find people who are already working on the same problem or have been trying to solve my same problem, their willingness to join my project and be my influencers will be just much higher.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I agree. That's a great way to build that ownership and support, within the organization. Here's a question that is directed to me, but I'm going to ask you the question too, Chilla. This is from Antoine on YouTube as well. Antoine says, this is a question for Eric. How can an external partner be able to act as a change agent during a project? I believe the company must always have a change agent, but that's not always the case. So in your experience, Chilla, even though I'm going to deflect the question and give it to you, I'll pass on it and give it to you. But how do you manage that outside expertise that is required to manage change, but also the internal knowledge of the operations and the people in the organization, the culture, all that stuff? How do you end up marrying those two skill sets, and how have you seen it work best?
My first answer was going to be with difficulty. I think change agent and external change agent is an oxymoron for me. I think change agent, being an agent of change, an ambassador, whatever you want to call us, it implies an understanding of the context, of the stakeholders, of the channels, of the ways of working. Yes, this can be in the way. So actually, what I think could work better is if you really have to work with external teams, because sometimes you don't get, there's no people approved to be hired as change agents, or, there's just never a budget. Then you go with an external person, but I'd rather they design the strategy for me and propose a plan and a set of activities, but where I actually want the how to be validated in-house. I just can't, unless it's a company who has been working with you forever and ever, and they actually know better how you work than yourself. I've also seen this before. So I think with that asterisk, yes, an external change agent can be an effective change agent, but I'd rather someone designs the theory, proposes it, and then I contextualize it with an internal network of agents, and we execute in-house.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. It's sort of getting the best of both worlds and combining the skill sets of multiple resources to build a complete and a comprehensive change team. Good stuff. So what about, I want to shift gears a little bit, or sort of go take this a different direction here. This question is from Darian on LinkedIn. And Darian says, what lessons have you learned from cross-cultural or international teams? I know you mentioned that you've worked internationally, or you've managed or been involved with change that affects multinational teams. How are multinational change initiatives different, and what are some of the strategies you've seen work best in those multinational situations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so everything's more complex when you work with teams across the world, right? We can agree on this, but everything's also much more interesting and rich. So let me kind of tell a story about how I learned the value of, when I don't speak, for instance. So you can see how I am. I talk a lot. I'm an extrovert. I talk over people. Huge improvement areas forever and ever. But there was a time I was going to Kuala Lumpur, and I was the business account manager for a new account that we onboarded, and we had a large team there, and I needed to go there, and I needed to train the team on something, because surprise, surprise, as change managers, we also take care of change and trainings on process, less on process, but more on systems, ways of working, and operating models. And I arrived in KL, Kuala Lumpur, and I had this massive throat ache, and I just couldn't talk. So if I guess, it's a cliche, but my colleagues in Kuala Lumpur were much more polite than I was. And because I couldn't speak, they finally did. So that was a breakthrough point for me on this account when I arrived, and I just said, sorry. And they were like, okay, so now we tell you how things are. And I guess this taught me such a big lesson about listening and not assuming, and not just rushing in and talking over people when they're maybe more quiet, or sometimes people need to be called upon in a lot of cultures. And, then they'll just say the most amazing, the smartest thing, or the thing that will break your project that you would have otherwise completely ignored because you're like just doing this and rushing through your agenda.
Right.
So I think the power of listening is what I learned through my cross-cultural interactions. And the power of asking people, okay, this is kind of my view from where I am. What am I not seeing? Because I think too often we ask closed questions, and we just say, okay, is everyone in agreement? And then you kind of immediately move on to the, yes, sure, close the meeting. I issue the minutes. And people are unable to articulate what they really think about it. You never give them the permission if you are from a certain culture, which prizes loud and, out there kind of people, and extroverts in particular. So this, and also maybe it's not a cross-cultural thing. It's more extroversion, introversion spectrum. If you're working in a team with introverts, please don't ask them to immediately give you feedback on stuff. Like, leave them alone. Give them time to process. And then they'll go away, and the way they work best they'll come back with a list of things. Again, you never would have thought of, would have completely gone under the radar. But give them space. Don't force them into immediate reactions and responses. So yeah, I hope this answers the cross-cultural, international or question.
We're here with Chilla Batori talking about her experience and lessons from being a change lead at Fedex. And we're going to continue that conversation when we come back. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Just tell me what you've got to say to me. I've been waiting for so long to hear.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me or visit our website for more details.
Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting and your host of Transformation Ground Control. I want to encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. It's a free report or a free guide that we published. It's one that I actually wrote that talks about best practices and lessons learned as it relates to change management. So as you know, on this podcast, we cover a lot of stuff related to the human sides of change, organizational change management, including training, communications, org design, all kinds of stuff as it relates to change management. So if you're trying to learn more about change management or you're looking for more direction and ideas on how to get started on your change management strategy and your overall journey, be sure to check out this guide. You can read it by scanning the QR code on the screen in front of you or in the links below for this particular podcast episode. You can find a link to take you to the page that will allow you to register to go ahead and download that and read it for free. So be sure to check it out. It's the Guide to Organizational Change Management, written by yours truly. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and hope you enjoy the rest of this episode.
I could never be the right kind of girl for you. I could never be your woman.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 186. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. And I'm here with Chilla Batori, who is a change engagement lead at Fedex out of Europe, talking about some of her lessons from digital transformation at Fedex. You talk about introversion versus extroversion, and it's funny that you say that because I was thinking before you said it, I'm a complete introvert, so I'm pretty far on the introvert spectrum side of things. So I do exactly what you said. I don't respond right away. I don't have an opinion. I don't have a response right away because I have to think about it, and I'm not going to verbalize it while I'm thinking about it. And so there's that. If you figure it's about 50-50, half of an organization is probably extroverted, the other half is probably pretty introverted. You've got to make sure you're speaking both languages. And also, too, you look at different cultures. Different cultures are more accepting of someone speaking up or more accepting of someone stating a concern in an open forum or not, or a one-on-one forum. Other cultures, it's not as comfortable because it's more hierarchical. And that's just not the culture of either the country you're operating in, or it could be the culture of the organization, too.
Exactly.
So, how do you what are some ways that you've seen not just the introversion versus extroversion side of it, but just different cultures in general? How do you navigate all those variations in a multinational change initiative?
Yeah, so I taught myself a bit about the theory. So I really like the Hofstede model of cultures, and then there's national cultures and then work cultures. But I think the national cultures model is really kind of what I often go to. And it's a great icebreaker as well. I used to do this with my team before we went into a transition. So good old days, neither. And then we would say, okay, let's compare the culture, that you represent and the one that, we're transitioning from and to, and then let's see like the biggest differences on the scales, on those histograms. And then what does this tell us? What kind of conflicts can we expect? Yeah. And how can we prepare, maybe not like the Navy SEALs, but, still prepare, visualize the kind of conflicts we may have because we're just wired differently. And then add the personal differences on top of that. So yeah, education. There's a book I love. It's the Culture Map from Erin Meyer. I just I can read this book like 5 times a day, and just look up a situation. So recently with my team, we looked at decisions with a capital D and with a small d. Right. So there's like these two ways of making decisions, and they don't even align with like the usual stereotypes about, Americans. No, they make decisions with a small d. I would have never thought, a culture which is quite straightforward and, often imposes decisions on its members. People make decisions, but very quickly, retract, and then they make another decision. Whereas you have Germany and Japan, which are very consultative societies or nations, and they'll not make a decision until every one of the members had agreed on it, but then they stick to it. They really religiously stick to it. So again, if you read up a bit about these things, and if you follow a couple of voices on the social media platforms, you'll just learn, even if you're not exposed daily, or you don't have to learn from your own mistakes. That's what I'm trying to say. But also learn from your mistakes. It's fine. I think it's fine. I was not born like this. I was lucky to study in the US when I was in junior high. But did I know everything about US culture? No, and I will never know everything about it. So yeah, I think this is lifelong learning about cultures.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier, one of the best ways to deal with, some of the multinational or just understanding change in general is to ask and listen. You're talking about just the need to ask questions and understand, listen, empathize, all that stuff. And it's even more important in multinational situations because, for example, as an American, if I'm working with a super hierarchical sort of a culture where people don't speak out or share their opinions, to me, it doesn't make sense because in America, that's what we do. We speak up all the time, even if we shouldn't. We speak up too much. We argue. So why is this culture over here not doing that? And so you have to really understand that it's not like it doesn't mean it's a bad thing or a good thing. It's just different. And so listening and understanding and really unpacking and dissecting different cultures, I think is important.
Yeah. And I think why is it so important to put this effort in there is because your change is never going to succeed if you just follow your own cultural norm, and decisions will be reversed. People will leave the room and do something completely different. The conversation after the meeting, is a very dangerous thing, because that's when, people can just come out and say, I completely disagree with everything that's been said. And then if you have not a very professional leader who likes to agree with their team, for instance, to gain some sympathy in a difficult situation, then your whole initiative is just been boycotted. So indeed, a lot of teams will not speak up. So you have the meeting after the meeting or the meeting before the meeting. I think that's even better because then you can prepare for the ambience, you can prepare for the questions, and you can proactively put those questions in the room on behalf of the more quiet participants. That also works.
Yeah, makes total sense. Yeah, I like it. Now, here's an interesting question from Scott on YouTube. Scott says, how do you as a change manager push forward on a project you may not be able to fully support, but the direction is coming from the top to do the project? And you just sort of alluded to this a minute ago, about, sometimes people aren't on board necessarily, and how do you get them on board? We were talking about that, but what do you do when you yourself, or, you may not be fully committed or fully excited about the change yourself? So how do you manage change management for the change management person? How do you
Yeah, I think so. I don't have I don't know if I have an answer for you. I think what's important about change. Yeah, I read recently that we should stop talking about the theory of change and the emotions that we go through and the change curve, because nobody cares. But I still think it's something that's worth knowing. Change is like grief, right? So the first person who we always refer to when we kind of try to explain what change management is about, the first person is a saber-toothed tiger who's chasing you, and then you produce the fight, flight, or freeze response. But if we move a bit further in history, there was this person called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she studied grief. And then the stages of grief that she described, they're exactly the stages of change. You don't start loving the change. You don't start by embracing it. You have to, you have to go through a lot of other steps before you could get to the phase where you yourself can start rationalizing and finding the positive. And sometimes there is no positive. So sometimes you just find okay, let's just do this, guys, and like finish it and move on to the next better project, maybe. So, let's face it, this change, how I do change management is not for myself, right, at home, but I do it for work. So, not every change project is going to be your favorite, but this is what we tell to the managers and so the change managers, as well as the people managers. Try to get through your change curve first. You can't help people if you yourself are conflicted about the change, because then the whole kind of the body, everything will be obviously wrong or in dissonance with your messages. Yeah, you say that this is good, and then you have this really sour face, or you never show up for meetings for 2 weeks because you're I don't know, struggling, but use whatever word you want for it. So again, be honest with yourself. And try to get through your own trough first before you could help others. The analogy is always of the mask on the airplane. You can't help infants, others, before you help yourself. So get that mask first, figure out how you feel about it, let go if you can, right? Make that decision to move ahead. And I really like this thing about change. I really strongly believe that it's a decision. You make a decision to move on with the change. And if you want to keep on looking backwards, you'll never move on. You'll never be successful. You'll never find that new beginning. And there are a lot of people who go looking back. They love to live in the past. But, there has to be a point when you decide to let go. And then your brain and your mental capacity and everything will be available to creatively plan that change for your people. So this would be my very long-winded answer to a very complex question, actually. So thank you for that.
Yeah. It's very complex. I mean, that's a great summarization of what is a very complex thing there. And this is just a follow-up comment from Sterling on YouTube. Sterling says, precisely, there are dangers of both, being too agreeable and needing validation from senior stakeholders all the time. So that was sort of a follow-up from an earlier point you had made there. And then here's a comment from William from YouTube as well. William says, people who are negative and vocal are easier to work with. The negative people who are pleasant but whisper dissent can be tough if they have the ear of leadership. That's kind of an interesting point. It's not really the introvert extrovert thing. It's just or it could be. I mean, it could be partially because someone's introverted and therefore they're not going to be as vocal, and it's the change resistance or the negativity isn't as easy to spot because it's someone that perhaps is introverted or they're just not as vocal. But in general, how do you deal with negativity just in general? I mean, whether it's someone that's vocal about it or not, how do you overcome that in a change initiative you've been involved with?
Yeah, we often say people are going to naturally resist change. I don't really believe in this. And so I think when changes are explained and people are treated with respect, even bad changes will be accepted. Eventually, somehow, blah, blah, blah. Use adjective of your choice. I think what's more interesting about resistance, and again, I constantly, because I always follow them and I love what they do. Prasa has this wonderful article about the root causes of resistance, and that it's not as simple as people resist change just because they're lazy or there's so many reasons why people resist. Can you please take time to explore, and you might find actually very valid reasons why they resist change. You may have completely missed something. So I don't like this statement, and I don't accept it that resistance is normal and everyone's negative. Now, how to deal with negative people? Again, often I found that just listening to people, sitting down and giving them the space to ventilate, I'm not going to say moan, but ventilate and express themselves is all they need. Because then again, talk about respect, they feel heard. They understand everyone's an adult. They understand most of the time that we're not going to change the corporate strategy because they don't like it. But they have been given the opportunity to say that they don't like it and it doesn't work for them. And we're going to say, yeah, I hear you. It doesn't work for everyone. I still want to go back a little bit to the silent, to the whisperer.
Yeah. Quiet person
Question.
that's behind the scenes.
Yeah, exactly. Because these are the real subvertive elements,
Harder to
So
find.
exactly, really hard to find. And as a change manager, you're not often that close to the people, to the department. Sometimes you're thrown in. Some change management and transformation departments work as internal consultants, so you just get assigned whatever project you need to work on and then reassign. So this is where I would say the responsibility of the leaders comes into play. A leader themselves should identify people who are doing this subversive whispering. And if they find that it's not just the desire to be heard, right? That respect thing that we spoke about, that they should put an end to this. They should put an end to this. You can't be everywhere as a change manager. And this is why when I mentioned that sponsors, so the executives have a really different set of responsibilities in terms of, what messages they need to articulate, what their role is in the change. They have to be there and they have to be visible. They need to sponsor the change, articulate why it's good for the company, but they also have to put an end to this kind of subversive behaviors, which on the long term hurt the department. So when I have my conversation with the sponsors on what I want them to do over the next few weeks, besides setting up a town hall and supporting me with some opening and closing remarks on one of the sessions that I organize, I also ask them about rumors. I ask them about the mood. I ask, and when they say everything's fine, then sorry, but I bring in the bad news if I have heard otherwise. So I think, and they really appreciate it. So imagine the leader who is in an ivory tower and no one dares to tell them the truth or the real sentiment. Again, imagine you're not in the US and this is not in your culture. The leader, if they're open and interested, they really will appreciate this. So find the right words, find the right tone, but do bring those messages and then help have the leader take that step and fulfill their leadership role.
Yeah, that's great, really good advice. We're here with Chilla Batori talking about her experience and lessons from being a change lead at Fedex. And we're going to continue that conversation when we come back. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting, and I want to invite you to join our annual tech agnostic conference called Digital Stratosphere. Digital Stratosphere is a conference that features some of the industry's brightest minds, greatest thinkers, and it's a great opportunity to network with peers, other industry people, other CIOs, other project team members that are going through digital transformations or ERP implementations. We've got a great lineup of speakers this year. It's a 3-day event, a lot of great entertainment, networking opportunities. I'll be there as one of the keynote speakers, along with some of my favorite speakers in the industry as well, both within Third Stage Consulting, but also outside the company as well. So I encourage you to check it out and learn more. You can go to stratosphere2024.com to learn more about the event. You can see the agenda, the way it's shaping up, and you can see some of the past testimonials of people that have attended. And the event is October 2nd through the 4th, 2024. It's going to be based in Denver, Colorado, downtown Denver, beautiful downtown Denver in the fall, which is a great time to visit Denver if you haven't been. Again, stratosphere2024.com. Check out the agenda. Check out our early bird pricing for passes. And the other beautiful things, if you can't be here in person in Denver, which we hope you can, but if you can't, you can also join remotely as well. We have virtual passes available as well, so you're able to join from wherever in the world you might want to join from. So stratosphere2024.com, check it out, and I hope to see you there.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
I'm gonna leave it all out there. I'm gonna leave it all out there tonight. I'm gonna leave it all out there.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 186. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. And I'm here with Chilla Batori, who is a change engagement lead at Fedex out of Europe, talking about some of her lessons from digital transformation at Fedex. Another question from Sterling on YouTube here, which I love this question. Would excessive agility impede an organization's change management in the long run? Could a little rigidity in the business strategy perhaps facilitate change if possible? And maybe I'll ask maybe a follow-up or sort of a part two of that question, or that sort of maybe another example of how sometimes flexibility and nimbleness of an organization can actually work against you. A lot of times when we're helping clients implement really flexible technologies that can do, a simple process a million different ways, depending on how you want it, a lot of times that becomes an excuse to resist change, because now I have a tool that just allows me to do the way things I've always done things. And so maybe I'm a little bit more resistant to change because now I have a tool it's a modern tool, but it's sort of reverting back to old ways of doing things. Mm-hmm. So that's another, maybe example that we see a lot of times that organizations that have that sort of flexibility with the tools or the process changes they're going through, or the fact that we're a decentralized organization. I'm giving you a bunch of examples here, but just in general, does that flexibility versus rigidity work against you or for you, or how do you manage that, or how do you see change working differently in those two different extremes?
Yeah. So I wanted to ask, when I first read the question, I was thinking, what do you mean by agility? Do you mean we're changing our priorities all the time? We have no idea, what our strategy is, and we're just, figuring it out on the go. But let's not assume that that's the case, right? So I think most of the time, this is how it comes across to a lot of people. And so I hear this all the time from the people on the ground. Where are we going? I mean, I can't believe that we're doing something else again, or you're piling on, onto my existing very long list of priorities, and you're not letting go of anything. It's just not possible to work this way. So I think there are organizations where things are changing too much and too fast, and that people then all of a sudden, I think, just quit mentally, right? Change fatigue is an example that we can just, easily refer to. I think what's happening in our world, I mean, imagine, right? Change is cumulative, or the impacts of change on the individual. It's never just the one thing that's happening at work, or those 10 things usually, right? Again, it's never just one project, but your family, everything, politics, the weather. So I think there are organizations that should do less change and should be less agile if agility means we just can't stick with one thing for long enough. And I think people should just talk about it and just say it, guys, come on, yesterday this, tomorrow completely different, or, both, or 5 things at the same time. No, we can't do this. Can you please rethink, what's the most important thing, or what are the most important 5 things? And those 5 may change, but there really shouldn't be 25. There should be kind of 5-ish, or whatever the right number is, depending on the size of the change. But then I also don't think that without having agility or that nimbleness, you can operate and be successful anymore. You make a business plan, and then a rocket hits. I'm from Ukraine, so imagine, some things are really, really close to heart. So then you need to move your whole company to a different country, set up a VAT number, and get certified there to do business. So you can't just go on with the plan you had created X months ago if the macro and micro circumstances change. So I think it's about finding this soft spot. Maybe it doesn't exist, or maybe it's a range of soft spots, and then depending on people's capacity for change, they'll be able to do more or less in that period. But there's no one simple answer to this extremely complex question.
Yeah, and I think it is a very complex topic, and we could probably spend the entire hour that we have here today. We could have just spent on that one thing and still not really unpacked it all together. But I think in general, a lot of times, a lot of organizations we work with they're actually trying to become both. They're trying to become more agile as an organization, but they're also trying to standardize. They're trying to act like one company because they've grown through acquisition, they've grown organically and entered new markets and launched new product lines and all these different things that sort of organically go a bunch of different directions. And then, leadership looks up one day and says, wow, we're really inefficient. We're acting like 20 different companies. Why don't we just start acting like one company? And it's we get more efficiency, better customer experience, all that stuff. And so a lot of times just that vision and painting the strategy for the organization and how this change initiative supports that. I mean, I think people
Yeah.
in general understand that. I don't think they generally view that as a bad thing if we're, call it less flexible, because now we're not doing things the way we've always done them. Now we're acting like one company, and we have more of a common operating model. So not always the case, but some people will resist. But I think in general, that's a way to sell it. I mean, it's a positive thing. You could be honest. You could tie it back to a broader business strategy. And if it makes sense to people why you're doing it, then usually they're going to come along eventually.
Exactly. And the change, one of the projects I'm in at the moment is all about this. So you've mentioned where I work. We've announced a year ago becoming one Fedex. I mean, that's a huge change for the enterprise. And then what does it mean? We're still just discovering it. But I must say, it's a very welcome change, because it comes. So I'm based in Europe. I joined a different company, not Fedex at the time I signed my contract with Fedex, because we were acquired or integrated, merged, find the right word. And therefore the company culture, the systems, the ER, everything is different, and it's still different. And I must say, people can't wait to be one Fedex. So in that case, one company, one team, one ERP, one everything, because it is, fragmentation is tiring. You can't standardize. You always have to be explaining your exceptions. Oh, then you're labeled difficult. Oh, you're in Europe. Oh, what? So I think people are I'd say, if we want to bust a few myths, people don't resist change just for the heck of it. No, people are not lazy. No, people want to do the right thing. And most of us bring our heart to work, and we want to have a purpose. We can execute consistently without, and consistently is the agility kind of, how much is too much agility question. So I look at people like this, and when you start with this positive, assume positive intent in all these change conversations, I think it changes the tone, and it says, we thought this, or this is kind of where we need to end up. How do we get there? Let's decide that together. Let's plan that together. And that really then changes the acceptance levels for change management.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think you have a really good point that you said in there. You had a better choice of words than I'll paraphrase here, but your point about how people have good intentions, I think that's a point that gets lost a lot. I think a lot of times people think, well, if Chilla is resisting this change, she must be a problem. And a lot of times, well, it's because Chilla doesn't understand the change, or no one's explained it to her, and there's an absence of information. And so it creates a, kind of a fear that is unintended, but it percolates and it turns into fear. And I think a lot of times people assume, well, it must be because Chilla is a problem. Well, no, it's just because Chilla doesn't understand. So we help her understand. She might not be 100% fully on board with it, but she's going to understand a lot better than if you don't share the information in general. So
yeah. And one thing, leaders, by the time they get to the communication point, they've went through their own change curves 10 times over. So they're completely on board. They know everything. They understand all the connection. But then imagine the person, they're hearing about this for the first time. They give them the time to walk their own change curve and take their time and repeat those messages. I don't know. I heard so many ways, 7, 17, how many times, as many times as you have to. But give people the time to understand, and then they'll resist much less. You're completely correct, Eric.
What about this? This is a sort of an elephant in the room here. This is from Harry on LinkedIn. There is one overwhelming fear of being replaced by AI or change anywhere in the organization. Maybe let's focus on not just necessarily AI, but AI is a good example. Technology oftentimes is perceived as a risk, and AI, I would argue, is perceived as even more of a risk than technologies of the past. How are you seeing AI and other emerging technologies, automation, all this stuff that's happening in the market? How do you see that affecting people's ability or willingness to change, and how do you overcome it?
Yeah. So how many minutes do I have to answer this question? Because it's a huge one, but really good one. And indeed, it's the elephant in the room these days. I've read a lot of kind of studies and projections about, is AI going to take away all our jobs? And then how many jobs is this? And then every year, basically, or probably every quarter, they revise the estimates, and then they say, no, but if you're in a creative role, your job is safe. Yeah, right. Look at all the stuff that that DALL-E does and all the amazing visual arts generators. So I think none of us are safe, and I think there's nothing to be afraid of because it's definitely coming. So we might as well prepare. That's kind of my attitude towards it. Approach it with curiosity. That would be another thing I'd say. I'm currently thinking about doing a course on human AI integration and the change management implications of that, because I think this is what's coming our way. Most jobs, according to the current research, right? So 2024 and maybe a few months ago, most jobs can't be automated completely. It's tasks that are being automated, right? And then again, how do you approach what's right to be automated? Ask the people what tasks they hate the most. I mean, again, until now, I think in my experience, we mostly automated all the repetitive and extremely error-prone manual tasks that freed up people's capacity to do, to interact with customers, to think. I mean, thinking and time for thinking in our calendars is something I think we've completely forgotten to create space for. I consciously block time in my calendar for learning, for reading, because otherwise, if I only do and work through my to-do list, I'll be brain dead and also extremely demotivated. I mean, there's something for the soul, and so I want to look at AI, and I think a lot of companies are thinking about this. Keep the people, but keep them doing something more meaningful, and ask them, what are those tasks that you can truly automate? I think it's really similar to the dawn of outsourcing. Again, a story. I worked in a team that completely should have never been outsourced. The process that we were doing was, oh goodness, I can't even say this. So we were providing support for healthcare machinery breaking down in the UK, scheduling preventative maintenance, as well as sending engineers to fix the machines. And this was at a time when we did not really have a good software for route planning. So I was sending people across London to spaces they were never going to get to hospitals because of traffic, and I had no idea because there was never a software, which should have told me what's the traffic situation. So that process should have never been outsourced. Again, same thing. Find the opportunities, I think, for AI, for processes that should have never been outsourced and should never be done by a human in 2024 because they're so error prone. But keep the human in there, because if you stop checking the code, if you forget the controls you built in, if the business environment changes and there's no one to translate that for the AI, you have lost control of your process. So please don't be afraid of AI. Get to know it, work with it. But yeah, don't hide, because it is coming. And I think the sooner we can embrace it, the better, and the more educated decisions we can make about what tasks, again, not processes, tasks, we decide to automate.
Yeah, an AI can be a great point of leverage and scale for individuals. You can do more work, you can add more value, and it's taking all the great work you've done over the years now, and it's sort of exponentially increasing your effectiveness and efficiency and allowing you to do more. And so we have yet to see any massive, reduction in force, or any reduction in force for that matter, resulting from AI and even automation in general. We don't see a lot of head cutting like we might have seen 20 years ago in this space. Although here's a comment from Perry, right as I was saying that. Perry on LinkedIn said Dell laid off their entire HR department just 5 days ago. I hadn't heard that, but to sort of play devil's advocate, I'm saying I haven't seen a lot of technology initiatives result in headcount in recent years, but there are organizations out there that are laying people off, and there is attrition and change that some organizations are going through, but in general, it's usually not because of automation, or it's not because of AI. Although, some technology companies I've read are laying off as a result of AI. So as I'm saying that, I'm also contradicting myself at the same time.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of change in the world, and you've got to just know how to navigate it and be sensitive to the fact that real and perceived fears out there.
And there are, and I'd ask Dell, what do they call HR?
Yeah.
Because business partnering, people development, talent and reward programs post COVID, in this world where we no longer want to go to the office and we want to work in the countryside and get the same pay as in a big city, these are HR topics. So if this was laid off, then let's check on the Dell share price in a few, or maybe start buying in a few years when it's really
Right.
low. I don't know. I don't have any affiliation with Dell, and apologies, I'm speaking out of turn here. But admin tasks, approving holiday requests, consolidating data, and then spitting out some analytics along certain parameters, which were again approved by the leadership and are in line with the strategic goals. Those you should be able to automate.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. And here's a sort of a good capstone question that sort of ties this all together. Everything we've been talking about here today, you've shared a lot of great ideas and experiences with us here today, Chilla. But if we back up for a second and say, well, how do we get started on all this? I mean, we've talked about a lot of stuff. It's hard to boil the ocean. This question's from Darian on LinkedIn, and she asks, what are some tips for teams getting started on their change management initiatives within broader business or digital transformation? So maybe just to narrow that down even more. If I haven't managed change yet, or I know that change management is going to be an issue and I haven't really started my change management initiatives, what are some good ways to get started?
Yeah, I think start wherever you can. There's no best formula. I think having the realization, acknowledging that change management is not something that project managers do on the side, I think is the first big step. So if you have that in your organization, then I salute you, because that's where it all starts. Where you put the team who will do change, you can put them in HR, you can put them in transformation, you can put them in continuous improvement. Again, I don't think it really matters, as long as it's at least a couple people who know a little bit of theory and then have the people skills to work with the subject matter experts who know, and then they can help again consolidate the strategy, the information of where we need to get to, with the how that comes from these experts. Again, you don't have to have anyone trained on process. I became a change manager, or in the Association of Change Management Professionals. I don't think that the degree is the most important criteria. I think anyone who cares about people, who cares about doing the right thing for the organization, whatever you call it, strategy, the budget, meeting the financial targets, it has to be actually a combination of these things. And then also doing it with the right behaviors can be your first, can be your first change agent. And then if you have a big transformation agenda, eventually I think you will arrive at the conclusion that you do need teams or team members for whom this is not just a hobby, and you also need leadership commitment to this, which is beyond lip service. So I think depending on the maturity of your organization, you can start very small and you can educate yourself with all the resources out there, and then when you scale up, you can choose to hire for it, and then train for it, and train across the board, not just your change managers. I think if everyone speaks the same language about change and why it matters, and if they say, I'm in denial at the moment, so please don't start kind of telling me all the good things about this change. I'm not there yet, or I just need time for myself. So eventually, when it becomes a common language for the organization, that's when you reach maturity point. But there's so many ways of getting there.
All right. Thank you, Chilla. Great conversation. Really enjoyed getting to know you and getting to learn from some of your experiences from a multinational perspective, and also really appreciate the audience questions we had there as well. Great lessons there. And I think that's a good place to leave the episode for this week, is just to kind of digest some of the content and some of the takeaways that she's shared with us here today. I want to thank you all for joining here today in another great episode. Hope you enjoyed it and found value. You can find past episodes. If you can't wait until next Wednesday when we drop our next episode, just go to transformationgroundcontrol.com and you can see all 185 past episodes that you might have missed. So check it out, transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also subscribe to it, listen or watch wherever you prefer by going to that one website, transformationgroundcontrol.com. So I want to thank everyone for your time here today. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next week on another episode of Transformation Ground Control. Take care.